There is a question Westerners keep asking about Russia. How can people believe such obvious lies? How can they watch state television, hear one absurd explanation after another, and still not look for the truth? But many ordinary Russians ask the same question about you. They look at Western media, Western politics, Western protests, Western outrage, and they think you are the brainwashed ones. That is the mirror Putin built. On one side, Russians are told the West lies about us. On the other side, they are told truth itself does not really exist. Only interests, owners, and propaganda. Only whoever has enough power to make their version louder. That is why the Kremlin does not need every Russian to believe one perfect lie. It only needs them to accept two concepts. First, everyone lies in their own favor. Second, we are never going to know the whole truth. Once those two ideas settle in, almost anything can be dismissed. Bucha, Mariupol, torture, deportations, missile strikes on apartment blocks. The answer is always ready. What about Iraq, Libya, and Yugoslavia? What about Western propaganda? What about your hypocrisy? And suddenly, Russian crimes no longer have to be defended. They only have to be dissolved into a fog where everyone is guilty, everyone is cynical, and no one has the right to judge. I'm Elvira Bary, a writer born in the Soviet Union. And today I want to show you how Putin convinced so many Russians that the West is brainwashed, and why this belief is one of the oldest survival tools in Russian society. Here's our roadmap: the death of truth. Why the Russian state does not need people to believe one lie, only to doubt all facts. The hypocrisy loophole. How Iraq, Libya, and Yugoslavia become excuses for Bucha and Mariupol. The cynic's armor. Why believing everyone is evil removes the burden of guilt. The dangerous belief. Why passionate political faith looks foolish, suspicious, opaque. If you'd like to keep getting this kind of deep dive analysis, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also join my think tank, support through PayPal or Super Thanks, or tap Hype Points. And if you are listening on Spotify, follow the show there too. It really helps. Now let's begin with the first lie. Not that the Kremlin always tells the truth, but that truth itself is dead. The death of truth. Russian propaganda does not only lie. It teaches people to stop expecting truth. That is the key difference. In the West, people argue over facts. Whether the numbers are right, whether a claim is supported by enough evidence. The argument might be messy, but all sides still assume one thing: facts exist, and somebody may be closer to them than others. Russian state propaganda attacks that very assumption. Its deepest message is not "believe us." It is "do not believe anyone." Every channel has an owner. Every journalist has a sponsor. Every activist has a grant. Every human rights report has a political purpose. Every video can be staged. Every witness can be bought. Once a person accepts this, the Kremlin no longer needs to prove its case. It only needs to muddy yours. This is why Russian propaganda can tell contradictory stories without embarrassment. Ukraine is run by Nazis. Ukraine does not really exist. Ukrainians are our brothers. Ukrainians are Western puppets. Russia is not at war. Russia is fighting NATO. The Russian army does not target civilians. Civilian deaths are staged. Or they happened, but Ukraine did it. Or maybe nobody knows. To a Western viewer, this looks stupid. Pick one lie you want to say, but that misses the point. The point is not to build one solid version of reality, but to flood the room until people stop looking for the floor. R&D called this model the fire hose of falsehood. High volume, multi-channel propaganda with a shameless disregard for consistency. It is fast, repetitive, emotional, and overwhelming. The goal is not persuasion in the old sense. It is exhaustion. A person who is exhausted says, "Who knows what really happened?" That sentence is gold for the Kremlin. During the war, this became especially clear around atrocities. After Russian forces left Bucha in 2022, Human Rights Watch documented summary executions, unlawful killings, torture, and enforced disappearances. The evidence was ample. Bodies, witnesses, dates, locations, patterns. Russian propaganda made no attempt to refute each fact. Instead, it threw out alternative theories. The bodies were staged. The Ukrainians killed them. The West invented it. The timeline was fake. The satellite images were fake. The witnesses were fake. Not one coherent explanation. A cloud of doubt that buried the facts and evidence under noise. The same method works inside Russia because it rests on lived experience. For generations, people saw official truth change overnight. Yesterday, one man was a hero. Today, he was an enemy of the people. Yesterday, the officials said one thing. Today, the opposite. People learned a simple lesson. Truth is not what happened. Truth is what the powerful can enforce. The internet didn't fully cure this. It gave access to information, yes, but it also gave access to endless noise. Telegram channels, YouTube commentators, anonymous insiders, state media clips, foreign articles, conspiracy threads. For a person already trained to distrust institutions, this does not feel like liberation. It feels like proof that everyone is selling a version. And that is how the psychological mirror forms. A Russian watching Western media doesn't always think they are free and we are censored. Very often he thinks their owners tell them what to say, just like ours do. Their propaganda is simply more elegant. That is why arguments based on just show them the facts often fail. The problem is not lack of facts, but a damaged belief that facts can mean anything. The hypocrisy loophole. When a Russian is confronted with Bucha, Mariupol, torture chambers, deported children, or missile strikes on apartment blocks, the answer often comes instantly. What about Iraq? What about Libya? What about Yugoslavia? This is called whataboutism. But the word sounds too cute for what it does. It provides a moral escape route. The logic is straightforward. If the West has also committed violence, then the West has no right to judge Russia. If the West has lied, then Russian lies are normal. If America invaded Iraq, then Russia invading Ukraine becomes just another empire doing empire things. Everyone is dirty. Everyone is cynical. Everyone kills when it suits them. And once everyone is guilty, no one is. This works because the examples are not imaginary. The Iraq War really did damage America's moral authority. NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia remains a deep wound in Russia's memory. Libya really did collapse into chaos after Western intervention. Western governments have made catastrophic decisions, covered themselves in noble language, and walked away from the ruins with speeches about values. The Kremlin takes these real failures and turns them into a permission slip. A Western crime does not make a Russian crime less real. An American lie does not resurrect a Ukrainian child killed by a Russian missile. NATO's actions in Serbia do not explain why Russian soldiers executed civilians in Bucha. Libya doesn't explain why Mariupol was destroyed. But whataboutism is not designed to explain. It is designed to interrupt moral attention. Imagine a man caught beating his neighbor. Instead of stopping, he points across the street and says, "That guy beat someone 10 years ago." Maybe true, still not a defense. But in Russian political culture, this move feels powerful because it attacks the judge. The West presents itself as a community that follows rules, that cares about democracy, human rights, and international law. Western legitimacy depends on that. So when Western countries violate their own values, they create exactly the opening the Kremlin needs. Russian propaganda then says, look, beautiful words are only camouflage. They talk about human rights when it helps them. They forget human rights when bombs fall from their planes. For many Russians, this sounds convincing because it matches what they are seeing around. Power is always hiding behind morality. There is also an emotional benefit. If the West is hypocritical, then Russians do not have to admit they are doing anything wrong. They do not have to ask why their country became poorer, more repressive, and more violent. They can say, at least we are honest about force. The West does the same thing while pretending to be civilized. That's how moral collapse turns into sophistication. The cynic feels smarter than the believer. The man who says everyone lies feels mature, worldly, impossible to fool. The person who still talks about justice sounds naive, and that is exactly where the Kremlin wants its citizens. Not necessarily truly convinced, just cynical enough to stop caring. The cynic's armor. In Russia, cynicism is emotional armor. If everyone lies, then you do not have to judge who is telling the truth. If every country is brutal, then your country's brutality becomes normal. If every politician is bought, then corruption is not a scandal. It is weather. This mindset is comforting because it lowers the cost of inaction. A person who believes in truth has obligations. If a journalist proves that civilians were executed, you have to react somehow. If evidence shows that your army destroyed a city, you have to decide what kind of country you live in. But a cynic escapes all of that. He says, we don't know the whole story, or there are no clean hands, or politics is dirty everywhere, or the classic Russian shrug, nothing depends on us anyway. That shrug is not laziness, it is self-protection. Because if you admit the truth, you face the next question, what are you going to do about it? And in Russia, that question is terrifying. Protest can cost you a job. A social media post can lead to persecution. A donation can be treated as support for extremism. So the mind builds a safer structure. There is no truth, only competing lies. Therefore, refusing to act is wisdom, not cowardice. This is why unconvincing propaganda can still work, as long as it reinforces the idea that politics is a swamp. Research on Russian propaganda has described how even clumsy, transparent state messaging can deepen political cynicism. The viewer may not believe the exact story, but he learns the deeper lesson. Public life is fake, and only fools take it seriously. That is the genius of the system. It turns disbelief into obedience. In a normal propaganda model, the state wants true believers. In Russia, true believers are useful but not necessary. The more valuable citizen is the tired citizen. The person who says, I don't watch television, I don't trust anyone, I just try to live. A tired citizen never organizes, protests, or joins any movements. Cynicism begins as protection from manipulation. In Russia, it ends as protection for the manipulator. The dangerous belief. In Russia, if you believe passionately in a political cause, you are seen as weird and suspicious. This is hard for many Westerners to understand. In the West, political passion can look respectable. Annoying, yes. Loud, yes. Sometimes unbearable at dinner, but still normal. People march for climate policy, abortion rights, gun laws, and other causes. Some of these people are sincere, some are performative, some are confused, but the act of caring is not automatically treated as evidence of corruption. In Russia, political belief carries a different smell. The smart person is expected to keep distance, smile at slogans, avoid extremes, keep a low profile. Never trust any movements, because movements are either controlled by the state, infiltrated by security services, or funded by someone with an agenda. This did not appear from nowhere. Russia's political history trained people to fear belief. The 20th century was full of people who believed. Revolutionaries, party activists, patriotic volunteers, moral crusaders. Then the state's policy changed, and yesterday's believers became tomorrow's criminals. So the survivor learned a different ethic. Do not worship causes. Causes eat people. After the Soviet collapse, another lesson arrived. The 1990s were full of all kinds of promises. Many people felt cheated by all of them. Then Putin came and offered not belief, but order. Not participation, but withdrawal. Stay out of politics, and politics will stay out of your apartment. That bargain was always false, but it was emotionally powerful. Now, when Russians see Western activists, they often interpret them through this old code. Why would a person shout in the street unless someone benefits? Who paid him? Which foundation? Which party? Which billionaire? Which hidden hand? The Kremlin feeds this suspicion constantly. The label foreign agent turns civic action into contamination. Independent journalists, human rights groups, cultural figures, election monitors, anti-war voices all can be marked as people serving someone else's interests. In 2026, Russia even designated Pavel Talankin, co-director of the Oscar-winning documentary Mr. Nobody Against Putin, as a foreign agent after he secretly filmed pro-war indoctrination at a Russian school. The message is, if you expose the system, you are not a citizen with a conscience. You are an instrument of the state's enemies. This is also why Kremlin influence operations abroad matters so much to the Russian worldview. When Russian state-linked actors secretly pay influencers, create fake news sites, imitate local media, or manipulate protests abroad, they are not only attacking the West, they are proving their own theory of politics. Look, they say, without saying it, everyone can be bought. Everyone can be steered. Grassroots activism is a mask. Media freedom is a costume. Behind every noble phrase stands money, service, and control. The US Justice Department's 2024 doppelganger case accused Russian actors of using fake domains to imitate legitimate news outlets and spread Kremlin narratives. In another case, US prosecutors said Russian state media employees secretly funded a Tennessee-based media company to push pro-Russian messages through American influencers. These operations confirm the Kremlin's own cynical myth. Politics is manipulation all the way down. And this creates a trap for ordinary Russians. If every believer is a fool or a paid actor, then genuine courage becomes invisible. Navalny was paid. Anti-war Russians are paid. Everyone with a moral position is either stupid or rented. This belief protects the cynic from shame. It makes cynicism feel adult and smart. I am not naive like those Western people with their rights, protests, flags, and slogans. I know how the world really works. But this is a trap. Because the moment you decide that all belief is manipulation, you also lose the ability to build anything better. No trust, no working together with other people, no future. Only private survival under public lies. Before you go, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever tried to show someone clear evidence and they answered with some version of everyone lies anyway? If this video helped you understand Russia more clearly, please like the video and subscribe. Share it with one person who still thinks propaganda works only by making people believe lies, not by making them stop believing truth. And if you want to support this work directly, you can join my think tank, leave a super thanks, support via PayPal, or tap Hype Points to help this episode travel further. And if you are listening on Spotify, follow the show so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching. See you next time.